All right. Well, this is really just kind of an informal talk, uh, something to let the community know a little bit more about you and about your background a little bit. So why don't you just start out with telling us a little bit about your background?
Okay, I guess the best way to start would be to say that my background, education-wise, is engineering, and spent a number of years working as a professional engineer, designing projects that are very similar to the projects that any city needs. Water systems, wastewater systems, airports, parks, landfills, all of these things we have done at one time or another.
And when did you come to Kerrville? Where were you before here?
I began working here mid-70s, I guess, and actually moved to Kerrville in '84.
And you're retired, but you do still maintain an office, don't you? What do you do with what's with the office?
Actually, Mark, I don't want to retire. I would go nuts if I didn't have something to do. And so we are still active, albeit not as much as in the past.
So what are some of the projects you're working on
We have several small water systems that are needing to be upgraded, and we're working on that. We have some projects that are dealing with subdivisions. We have, let's see, what all else do we have? I've forgotten now. I don't have a list here in front of me, but
just to be clear, these are all outside the city of Kerrville.
That's correct.
You don't do any work, engineering work inside the city. Right?
Currently we do not. Years ago we did a lot of work within the city.
Okay. So what drew you into politics here in Kerrville?
Basically, I felt like that the city and the citizens had been very good to me and to my family, and it was time to pay back that, and that's really why.
So how do you view your role as a council member?
I guess the best way to describe it would be to try to provide the citizens with some way of communicating their needs and concerns. We have, as you well know, a very tight budget, and last year, because of that, I took the opportunity to sit down with the staff, and incidentally the staff had done a good job to begin with, on looking at costs, what we needed and didn't need, and so on. We went through the budget line item by line item. My question to the staff in each case was, do we really need this, or can we defer that, or those kinds of things, looking at the budget. And by doing this, we actually did not increase the tax rate. We did not dip into our reserve funds, but we did reduce the budget by about 15%.
So let's talk a little bit about last year's budget and where we're going this year and how you're looking forward. Last year, the city laid off 8 employees, I believe it was.
I think that's right.
But at the same time, there was money spent on a convention center study. Mm-hmm. And some people have pointed at that and said, you know, maybe that wasn't the best way to spend that money. How do you feel about that?
Okay, maybe a little background would help to begin with. First of all, we as a city recognize that our tax base, particularly the ad valorem tax base, is heavily skewed towards the residential side, and we need to do something to expand that tax base that doesn't put that load on the citizens, the residential tax base. Our second largest industry here is tourism, and so the idea was to look at expanding tourism. And of course, the convention center would be a logical step if you look at it from that perspective. We initially, when we started looking at this, we had some hoteliers come to us and say, we want to be a part of this. we had some developers come to us and say, we want to be a part of this. So the city staff prepared a request for proposal. We got four proposals. We selected one of those as the one to move forward with to try to get some answers. The criteria was to try to determine, number one, was it feasible? Number two, would it be something that the city could do financially? How to put that package together. The agreement with the selected developer was, you will provide us a complete convention center based on the criteria that we wanted to be able to handle up to 2,000 people at a time. That meant that about 27,000 square feet was in a main room would be the needed space. That of course means you've got to have breakout rooms for smaller groups as they break out of the main meeting. You've got to have kitchen facilities. You've got to have other service facilities. Additionally, they were to provide through private sources 250 room hotel, 3-star or better. They were to provide 1,000 parking places. They were to provide the development of a site, and the site, quite honestly, needed to be, depending on the terrain, depending on the location, 20 to 25, and have the opportunity to grow if and when that happens. As we got into it, the economy, of course, got worse, and the hoteliers said, no, now's not the time. We don't want to spend the money. And the developers came back essentially the same thing. So we said, okay, now's not the time to do it. We're going to put this information, which is all very good information, but we're going to put it on the shelf for future. And that's where we really are with it. I think that ultimately, at some point, when the economy turns around, we can benefit by looking at this again. But today is simply not the time to do it.
You've also been outspoken in meetings regarding the downtown city hall.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you're out on the campaign trail and you're meeting with people, are you finding that they support the decision that the council's made to this point, or are you finding you're having to explain it to people?
Frankly, I'm finding more people are supportive of it than are not. Those who have expressed concerns, once we explain all of the elements that are involved, many of them have turned around and say, oh, well, I understand, and yeah, it's a good idea. But there, like so many other things, there's too much partial information or incorrect information out there, and people sadly make their judgments based on that, and it would be very helpful if they would come and ask the questions. My door has always been open. I'm perfectly willing to talk to people and to explain things to them. There's no hidden agenda. I think that this goes back, goodness, 30 years ago, I guess now. The citizens started way back, and the council started way back then, trying to get City Hall downtown. And ultimately, right after, well, I think it was 2001, that we did a comprehensive plan, and there were numerous public meetings, public hearings, all of that. Well, City Hall downtown was one of the elements of that comprehensive plan. In 2007, I think it was, the same thing, many public hearings, lots of input. City Hall downtown is still one of the elements of the comprehensive plan. So we are trying to follow the comprehensive plan. Not this council, but prior council had set monies aside for either purchase of or construction of City Hall downtown. And that we had tried several times to make purchases or to set up things like at the old telephone building. That didn't work. The Bank of America building, that didn't work. And so this is just another try at accomplishing what's in the comprehensive plan. The truth of the matter is that that property is owned now by a nonprofit, and it is not on the tax rolls. It will not be on the tax rolls. So putting City Hall down there is not going to change that. On the other hand, if we go forward, and that's still a big if, that the properties we now occupy would be sold and put on the tax rolls. Main Street building would be sold and put on the tax rolls. Other properties that the city has and has considered could be sold and put on the tax rolls, which is a big advantage for the citizens of Kerrville. That gets property that is currently not on the tax rolls on the tax rolls. The other thing is that the monies that are acquired from those sales could be used to, you could reduce your debt, you could build infrastructure that we need. There's a number of things that can be done with those monies. The other thing is that our current agreement with the Callow Foundation is that we have a budget, we know what we can spend, we know the monies that are set aside, and if we cannot do the project within those monies, we have the option to say, we just can't do it. And I, as a council person, am not willing to spend more money than we have. If the money doesn't, or the project doesn't fit in the money, then it just ain't going to happen, as much as we might need it.
It seems like a lot of people aren't aware that bond issue, the $2.1 million that would go towards City Hall, has already been issued. It's already being paid for in the current tax rate. Yeah. A lot of people just aren't aware of it. How can you, as a council member, or how can the city staff and the city in general get people more involved in what goes on from day to day in the local government?
That's a great question. Mark, to be real honest, I have tried and have talked to people over and over and over again. Please get involved. We sitting up there on the dais can't know or read people's minds. We have a few people who are very outspoken that have their own agendas, and we listen to them. By and large, though, until an issue comes up, most people don't get involved. They are busy, and I understand that. Been down that road, but it's important.
How do you, knowing that there is a deficit in involvement or just sharing opinions among general community, how do you carry the burden of being that representative and attempting to know how people would have you vote on any given issue?
Carlina, the only way that you can do it is to ask people to get involved, and I do that almost every day. It is imperative that they do. It's their money that we're spending. It's not my money, it's their money.
What are some methods perhaps that you've used to connect with people and
just going to or seeing them in various places all over town, and trying to ask them when I do see them, what do you know about this? How do you feel about that? Are you supportive of one way or another? What are your concerns? That's the only way that we have of knowing. And Most people, by and large, have been very open and discussed their concerns, which is great. That's really how we as elected officials need to be listening and paying attention. And that's what I try to do. If somebody tries to contact me, if they will give me their phone number, I'll call them back. Whether or not they're in agreement, I mean, I'll call them back. And what I like to try to do, those who have concerns, set up an appointment with them. I'll meet with anybody. So
going forward, the next city council, what's the #1 priority for the next council? For you as a council member?
Mark, I don't know that I have a specific #1 priority. I would say that we need to look at several things. We've got to find some way to encourage business development to get the tax burden off of the residential ad valorem tax base. That's got to be. And now that's going to take a number of things. It's going to take, of course, you've got to have land. If you'll drive around today and look at what's available in land for business and or commercial, most of it has been divided up into small tracts, and it's pretty well occupied. There's not very much left out there. So where do we go from here? That's a good question. Then having worked with developers, I can tell you they are very specific in what they want. They want readily, easily usable land, in other words, flat, and we don't have a lot of that around here. They want the infrastructure, particularly water and sewer. They want access, highway or major streets. Those are the things that they look for in analyzing a development. That, of course, along with what the geographic or the population needs are, they look at that. So what we try to do, or what I try to do, is to look around and see what the city can do to make available the opportunity for business development.
Okay.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your current campaign, perhaps why you decided to run again, and how you can distinguish yourself from your opponent?
Carlina, I'm not going to talk about my opponent, okay? That I don't think is the proper thing to do. I'm running because as I said earlier, I feel like that it's time to contribute, to give back, and that's really it. I don't have any agenda or things that I feel like that have not been addressed, albeit slow. As a business person, I can tell you it drives you crazy, the slowness of any development. But on the other hand, if we as elected officials don't go through all of the hearings, all of the steps, we're accused of trying to hide something or to have a hidden agenda and that kind of thing. And that's not the case at all. So what we do is we spend the time and the effort to make sure that we have the opportunity for the public to participate. Whether they choose to or not, we don't control that. But we do go through that process, which is extremely time consuming and in some cases very frustrating. But we've got the river trails we can look at. We've got the downtown redevelopment that we can look at. We've got potential growth in the, we did look at and delayed for a time the expansion in tourism. So these are all things that are there that are, you know, on the cusp, so to speak, and hopefully we can get some of it off the ground. That's what I would like to see, because it benefits the citizens.